Major Garrett is the author of a brand new book, well, about a month old, Mr. Trump's Wild Ride, the thrills, chills, screams, and occasional blackouts of an extraordinary presidency. But I've been hoping to talk to him about that and other things going on over at the White House. And, of course, you know him as White House correspondent at CBS News, and he joins us now. Major, good day to you, sir.
Great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
You better. How do you like this mid-November weather D.C. is enjoying today?
It's a little harsh, a little early for my taste. I've lived in Washington since 1990. This is way too early for winter. I usually don't adapt to winter until about January, like everyone else around here.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a shock to the system, but we shall overcome. Listen, I want to get to your book, but frankly, I mean, what we're seeing play out in this drama between the White House and CNN and Jim Acosta and the White House Correspondent Association and many journalistic organizations like your own is sort of a story right out of your book, even though it's not in the book. Well, what is the latest on this lawsuit between CNN and many people who have joined the lawsuit and the White House?
Well, we were expecting, that is to say, the interested public, certainly interested journalistic parties. The White House is certainly an interested party. A decision from the judge today, was postponed and will be rendered, at least we have been led to believe, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. It was supposed to be at 3 o'clock this afternoon. This is uncharted territory, and it's territory that makes me deeply uncomfortable as a long-serving and long-standing White House correspondent. We've never had a scenario like this where the White House has revoked a hard pass. We've never had a journalistic organization of any kind sue the White House over that revocation. And now we're asking the court to resolve something that, to my knowledge, has never been specifically laid before a court because it's never been this amplified an argument.
Mm-hmm.
And the argument is, does the First Amendment cover convenient access to the White House? Now, the White House says Jim Acosta is no longer welcome, meaning he's not welcome under any circumstance. That's probably less defensible legal ground than to say, we just took his hard pass away, he can come back anytime he wants, he just has to go through the inconvenient process of asking to come in to the White House grounds as a White House correspondent on a daily basis. Revoking his press credentials does essentially create a barrier to an individual with an assigned journalistic duty of a standing news organization, in this case CNN. I'm not sure the White House is going to prevail on the grounds it's asserted that it has absolute control over the White House grounds and it can pick and choose who the journalists are who get to come in. But this is new ground, and I wish we weren't there. I wish they hadn't revoked it. I wish CNN hadn't gone to a lawsuit. I thought this could and always has been, if there's ever been a conflict negotiated at a level that doesn't involve this kind of clash, and then forcing a court to try to adjudicate the absolute definition within the White House grounds of what the reach of the First Amendment is or isn't. I'm not comfortable with that kind of argument at all.
I'm kind of with you, and by the way, not just the First Amendment argument, but that this is also, you're sort of forcing the hand of the judicial branch to tread into what is obviously an administrative decision from the executive branch. There's a separation of powers issue here, too.
It is, and look, I've asked tough questions, Larry. You know that. I've been dressed down by presidents. President Obama said I should know better in a very famous, well-recorded, it's in my book.
Oh, yes.
Confrontation over the Iran nuclear deal, and a question I asked that he didn't like. My perspective is I ask tough questions in pursuit of relevant and revealing answers. And the President of the United States, whoever it is, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, I've asked them all questions, can say anything they want to me. They're the duly elected President of the United States. They can say whatever they want to me. It's their microphone. It's their house. It's their place. They can ask whether they can call on me or not call on me. All of those prerogatives are there. But once called upon, at least I have some ability to voice my question, respect the institution, and then get the answer. And like comedians who don't make a practice of critiquing other comedians' jokes, I don't critique other journalists in the way they ask and seek answers to their questions. I do my work. I've done it for lots of different organizations, as you well know. Some perceived to be on the left, some perceived to be on the right. I've always been where I like to be, the journalist I always have been. So this is uncomfortable territory for me all the way around.
Major Garrett is our guest. His book is Mr. Trump's Wild Ride, The Thrills, Chills, Screams, and Occasional Blackouts of an Extraordinary Presidency. And I respect what you just said, and I'd love to take this conversation out of the lawsuit question, and I certainly don't want you to critique one of your colleagues there in the press room. I guess I ask a broader question then, taking Jim Acosta out of it. Would you agree, Major Garrett, that there is a standard of conduct? There is a expected behavior from a White House correspondent that
yes.
that I think
yes.
that all of you would agree upon, right?
There is no question about it. It's the most majestic political place in America, the White House. Second only, the only place second to that in my experience, where I spent almost 15 years in the United States Congress. It's a little bit more rough and tumble there. It can be rough and tumble at times at the White House, but it is a place of institutional heft and commands institutional respect. And I will say on my behalf, the previous press conference we had with President Trump in the Rose Garden, the president looked at me. I thought he called on me. I stood up. The White House aide handed me the microphone. I began to speak to the President of the United States. President Trump looked at me and said, "No, behind you, Caitlin." Caitlin with CNN, Caitlin Collins.
CNN, by the way, yes.
And so I said, "Oh." And what did I do? I handed back the microphone.
Right.
Now, some of my colleagues might say, "What'd you do that for? You have the microphone, you have a voice, you can speak." The President of the United States said, "Not you." To my way of thinking, that's enough. The President said, "I didn't call on you. I called on somebody else." All right, then.
Yeah.
And I didn't get a question in that press conference. Some might say, "Well, you laid down and you were too deferential." I don't feel that way. I stood up. The President of the United States said, "No, I don't mean you. I mean somebody else, another one of your colleagues." So I deferred, hoping he might call on me again. He didn't. That's how I orient myself to the institution. And the person who occupies that institution is chosen by the country. And I respect the institution and the country's choice. And I'm there to, on behalf of everyone, ask questions and, most importantly, Larry, get answers.
Yeah. And Major Garrett,
that's the whole part of this transaction. If you're not getting answers, then I think there's part of the job that's not reaching its fullest capability on striving to accomplish the main goal, which is to get answers.
Very well said. And I think that, and again, I know how hard it is to, I don't want you to critique a colleague, but I guess what I want you to answer is if you can understand how any American watching what has transpired over the last several weeks, and certainly the last press conference, if we agree that there is an acceptable code of conduct for a White House correspondent, can you understand how an average American watching what transpired there would say, well, that's got to breach and go beyond the appropriate code of conduct? I think that many people watching, setting aside the First Amendment arguments for a moment, would say, yeah, I think the president might have a point in saying, I don't want to deal with this guy anymore.
They very well might. And my interpretation of that, Larry, is all of these questions are best resolved through the political channels that our country has long developed and long relied upon. And that's why I think you've known me a long time, well enough to know that I do my level best to not put myself or make myself part of the story. And I think the best journalists operate that way. Because, again, I go back to that fundamental point. Why are you standing up to ask a question in the first place? To get an answer. Why is that answer important? Because it tells the country something it didn't already know.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of this interaction with the American presidency.
Yep, absolutely.
To inform the public of what they have not yet learned.
And not to argue a point or try to make a point or score a point. Major, I want back to the book real fast. Mr. Trump's Wild Ride, The Thrills.
We'll do this again. I hope you'll have me back.
Oh, please. I'm so glad to have you back in the fold here, and I want to do it often. I ask anyone who's covered this White House from any network, even bloggers who are covering this White House, are you keeping notes? Are you writing? But do you realize that you're seeing something that you never? Clearly, you recognize that, and you got your book out pretty quickly on the first year and a half. Is it everything that it appears to be from my perspective as I watch what you're going through every day in the White House?
Sure, and the real point of the book is, for all of the velocity of this presidency, and it comes at all of us at a very rapid pace, and things that feel momentous sometimes are, or they just feel that way and then they drift away. What I tried to put together in the book through about 14 different stories, chapters, are the things that have already occurred that are likely to be with this country for a good long while. Mm-hmm. If you look at the president's approach to the federal bench, from the Supreme Court all the way down to tax code, to deregulation, to immigration, to Middle East policy, to dealing with China and South Korea and North Korea, he has already left a mark. I'm not asking you as a listener or a reader to like it or dislike it more than you already do. I'm just trying to show you journalistically what happened, why it happened, who were the key players, and what we're going to look back on 5, 10, 15 years from now and say, you know what? Those were early tent poles of the Trump presidency, and they stuck with us. And my experience, my fourth president I've covered, told me that enough had happened that it was worth a book.
Yeah, and the people who elected Donald Trump to be president, many of them wanted a disruptor, and boy, in this first year and a half, almost 2 years, they definitely got disruption.
And I would say to them, if you crave a book about what's happened, not what hasn't, because I would say comparatively other books about the Trump presidency have been about what looks fearful, sounds chaotic, but actually didn't happen. If you crave a book about what's actually happened, I would suggest mine, humbly.
Yeah, I would too. It's called Mr. Trump's Wild Ride, The Thrills, Chills, Screams, and Occasional Blackouts of an Extraordinary President. An extraordinary presidency it is. And Major Garrett, always good to talk to you. Great to reconnect with you, and great job at CBS News. Thanks, Major.
Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
You bet.